Hello everyone and welcome back to another video, this time for the games I beat in 2022. This is a yearly tradition, if you will, of my channel where towards, at the beginning of the new year, I go over the games I beat on the previous year. And so I will be going over all the games I beat in 2022. Games that range from different systems as well as different eras, ranging from retro games all the way to modern games. So 35 games in total. I think I was pretty happy with my production considering some things that, happen in real life. Some shorter games were beaten towards the end of the year, but overall, I think it's a decent year, not my best, but not my worst. So without further ado, not trying to make this a huge or super long video, let's just get started and see where we end up in this video. So the first game I beat in 2022 was a courtesy of the Xbox Game Pass service on my Xbox Series S, and that game is Windjammers 2, developed by .emu. Fantastic revival of the game. This is a good sequel that it was a long-awaited one. As you guys know, I'm a huge fan of the original Windjammers game, actually, and I do have a gameplay video. It's one of my earliest videos on my channel, but Windjammers 2 stays faithful to the original, but brings new improvements, slight improvements in terms of gameplay, and of course graphics are great, but they still pay homage to the crazy, over-the-top 90s, early to mid-90s, kind of like, over-the-top characters and whatnot. So Windjammers 2 is, in my opinion, the perfect Game Pass game. It's a very arcadey type of gameplay, very short if you're looking to beat, the single-player mode. So yeah, perfect Game Pass game, and I'm glad I was able to play it because I really enjoyed the original one. The next one is a meme game, if you will. You guys know me; I love my karting games, and I decided to give a go or a spin for Garfield Kart Furious Racing. As you guys know, I do play different types of kart games every now and then, and this game obviously doesn't hold a candle to games like the Mario Kart games, obviously, or like some of the Sonic racing transformed games. But I decided to have a laugh. Garfield is one of my kind of like favorite cartoons from my childhood. I really enjoyed the comics, if you will, not the cartoons, but the actual comic books. And yeah, the game is not good, surprisingly enough, but I did beat the single-player campaign, all the circuits, and yeah, it was not the greatest game, but at the same time, it was kind of fun, just exploring the different mechanics and the different characters that I enjoyed in my childhood. So not the best game, but this is a meme game that can be purchased for under $1 when it's on sale. So I played this on PC via Steam, by the way. Another game that I play via Steam, and another game that I do have an impressions video on this on my channel. It's Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion, which is a homage, to the classic Zelda games. It has the over-the-top view from the retro or classic Zelda games, and the gameplay is also very similar, action-based with light puzzle solving here and there for the dungeons. But this game has a very unique sense of humor. It does have a lot of quirky characters, and overall an interesting story, actually, that turns a little bit dark actually. So yeah, this is an enjoyable game if you guys are into classic Zelda type clone games, if you will. Turnip Boy is a pretty decent one, and yeah, worth checking out if you enjoyed those games. Next up, another Steam game. This is an indie game on the shorter side, Kokoro Clover Part 1. There is a new release that I believe combines Part 1 and Part 2. So make sure you get the new release if you're somewhat interested in this game. But this is basically a side-scrolling action game that it's inspired by the Sunday morning anime TV shows of the 80s and 90s. So it has like a very unique vibe, a very unique presentation that truly makes you I guess feel part of those Sunday morning anime shows when you were little. This is obviously based in kind of like the Japanese TV shows. Great soundtrack, great presentation. The gameplay, unfortunately, is a little bit unpolished and on the unexciting side of things. Some bosses are very easy to beat. There's no a whole lot of thought put into the gameplay, unfortunately. But if you can get it for cheap, this game can be purchased for cheap when it's on sale. I think I highly recommend it just to experience the charm and the presentation of the game. I think it's worth it. Next up, one of the most interesting, I think, indie action games that I played, up to date, actually. I really had a great time with Death's Door. I played this on a PC via Steam, and yeah, fantastic game, published by Devolver Digital and developed by Acid Nerve. And it's a very obscure game with very tight gameplay. I guess some people say it's inspired by the Souls games in the sense that you have to be very careful, with your movements, especially for boss battles. You have to kind of learn their patterns, and then you have to react accordingly. Use the right weapons and so forth. So it's a very challenging game, but a very rewarding. Once you get the hang of the combat. And yeah, a great setting with interesting characters, if you will, and just an overall interesting art direction and design that really go along very well with the game. So I do have an impressions video on this. Really enjoyed my time with Death's Door. Highly recommend it if you guys are into indie, kind of like isometric action games. This is a great one to try. Next up, you guys know me, I'm a pretty big fan of the Ys series, and the Ys game I played on 2022 was none other than Ys 9 Monstrum Nox. I have an impressions video of this game on my channel. An interesting title. It's one of the modern Ys games that focuses a lot on action and just on the spot, changing party members, on the fly. The story was very interesting. You're basically imprisoned in Balduc with Adol Christin obviously at the helm, and yeah, it was an interesting Ys game. But out of all the Ys games that I played to date, this was one of my least favorites. Not to say the game was bad. It's just there were some things that really didn't click on me like other games did for the series. But overall, it's a very solid action-based JRPG. Very good place to start if you want to get into the modern Ys games. The story was decent. The characters also were decent, and yeah, a fun game, but not among my favorite Ys games, unfortunately. And I played that on the PlayStation 4. That was my choice of system for Ys 9. Next up, for the Nintendo Switch, we have Mario Golf Super Rush. Perhaps my least favorite Mario Golf game. Not to say it was a bad game, but some of the new gameplay mechanics, such as the speed golf, that was kind of like the big addition to this game. I didn't really like it that much, but the game does have a solid, single-player campaign with RPG light elements, if you will. But anyways, the game looks great, on the Switch, obviously runs great. So if you're a fan of the series, sure, this is worthy checking out. But in my opinion, it's one of the weakest entries in the series as far as, comparing it to other Mario Golf games. Next up, going a little bit retro here with a favorite childhood classic of mine, Super Mario Kart. This is a game that I play every now and then, every so often I fire this game up. I play this on the Nintendo Switch via the Switch Online service for the Super Nintendo games, and yeah, revisited a classic. I beat the entire game, all the cups on 100cc, which is kind of like the normal mode. And yeah, this is where everything started. Super Mario Kart. It's just fantastic franchise and series. This game, obviously, it's very primitive. It was the first of its kind. Mode 7 galore, with the Super Nintendo there. But yeah, a rubber band AI, which is really, really annoying. But all in all, this is one of my favorite Super Nintendo games. And again, it's worth revisiting, the game every couple years or so. So pretty happy to test this game out and play it on the Nintendo Switch Online service. Next up, we have Game Deck, which is a narrative-driven CRPG that I played on PC via Steam. I do have an impressions video on this game, and while this won't be anywhere close in terms of quality and production to a game like Disco Elysium, which is one of my favorite CRPGs of all time, really. Game Deck is actually a solid game. I highly recommend it if you guys can find it on a sale. The developer has been adding new content, new characters, every now and then. And a very interesting story, very interesting setting. It's kind of like a cyberpunk CRPG where you play as a private detective and you kind of solve crimes jumping from the kind of like the real world and virtual worlds. And the plot twists in the game are actually surprisingly very, very good. So I was overall happy with Game Deck. So make sure you check it out if you are into narrative-driven CRPGs. Next up, Metroid Dread on the Nintendo Switch. No further, discussion needed. I do have an impressions video, but this is basically one of my all-time favorite not Super Metroid, but one of my all-time favorite side-scrolling Metroid games. I think they did a fantastic job. Mercury Steam, obviously. I think they kind of build up on that quality and working on other Metroidvania games, such as the Castlevania games on the 3DS. Following up with the Metroid game on the 3DS, and now Metroid Dread is kind of like the culmination of their, design work. A very interesting game, just the perfect length and the overall great design. So this is one of the games that I really enjoyed my time with it, and fantastic game. Make sure you check it out if you have a Nintendo Switch. This is one of those games, exclusive games that it's worth having the system for, and fantastic Metroidvania overall. Very pleased with this game, worth the wait for sure. Next up, we have Xenoblade Chronicles Future Connected. I did play the definitive edition on the Nintendo Switch, but the particular game, I guess, or expansion that I beat for this game was a Future Connected, DLC expansion content, which on its own, it's almost like its own game. It's 10 to 20 hours long, depending on how you want to. How detailed you want your playthrough to be, but this was the perfect excuse to go back to the Bionis, go back and spend time with Shulk and Melia, and exploring the beautiful settings of Xenoblade Chronicles, which is one of my favorite JRPGs of all time. And the story unfortunately was a little bit disappointing. The story and the characters were not great in my opinion. Neither was kind of like the threat, kind of like the enemy. But overall, it was fun exploring the Bionis setting again with the gameplay. Combat system was very well done. It's basically the same as the original game with a couple new additions here and there, but. Yeah, overall, Future Connected, not the best, DLC or expansion, but worth exploring just to, go back to this setting and enjoy the, the scenery. Next up, we have Aperture Desk Job, which is basically a glorified tech demo for the Steam Deck. If you own a Steam Deck, make sure you try this game out, mainly because it's free, and secondly because the game does a really good job of kind of walking through the player through the different features of the Steam Deck, such as the touchpad, the touch control, the rumble features, the gyroscope, and so forth. And this is also based on the Portal game series, the Aperture company, whatever. So if you guys are a fan of the Portal games like I am, this is a great game because it does have that humor, Portal humor, if you will. That it's very fun to experience. So again, if you own a Steam Deck, make sure you try this game out. It's fairly short, but it does a good job on showcasing the strengths of the Steam Deck system.
Your job is bad.
Next up, we have none other than Celeste, another game that I played on the Steam Deck. Third time was the charm. This is a game that I originally started on Game Pass and then also on Stadia via the Pro subscription service. And then finally gave it a third chance on the Steam Deck, and stuck with it. And this became one of my favorite side-scrolling platformers of all time, actually. So I do have an impressions video where I glowed. I sing the praises for this game because it's such a well-made game. It does have a retro look, but a lot of quality of life, modern. Improvements for a side-scrolling game, such as being able to repeat the same stage immediately after you die. The levels are for the most part fairly short, so even though the game is brutally challenging and punishing, You know, you're always trying to beat the level, you know, with just one more time. You know, you give it another go until you beat the level and you master, you know, your reflexes and the moves you have to use. Just the, you know, the level design, everything about this game is very, very well crafted, and Celeste is a must try if you guys are into challenging side-scrolling platformers. And speaking of Steam Deck games, you know, I got the system and I was trying a bunch of games, and Horizon Chase Turbo is another one that I really enjoyed my time with. It's an indie racing game that it's inspired on the kind of like the 16-bit era Top Gear games, very arcadey. Very unique gameplay where, you know, you're kind of forced to, you just move laterally on the screen, but overall it's a fun game. I did beat the World Grand Prix mode. It takes a while actually, you know, to complete all the levels, and then you also have unlockables, you know, new cars, new vehicles, new parts for your car, you know, to improve them, you know, to make it easier for you to advance to the next like sections of the world. So yeah, a very well made game that I enjoyed on my Steam Deck. Performance was great, so very pleased with this game. Definitely one of the most interesting arcadey, kind of like indie racing games out there. And continuing with the Steam Deck, you know, I was obviously very heavily involved after I purchased the hardware. And this game was recommended to me after a sale. It was like a Steam summer sale or whatever, and decided to grab this for under $1. And that game is Oozi Earth Adventure, which is a side-scrolling platformer that was released in 2013. This game is not gonna win any awards for being, you know, a memorable side-scrolling game, but for less than $1, I highly recommend this game. This game served as kind of like a palate cleanser between challenging games. You know, at the time I was playing games like Celeste and Cuphead on my Steam Deck, so Oozi Earth Adventure served as kind of like the relaxing game, you know, in between those challenging games. And yeah, the gameplay is very simple, very straightforward. You know, it's a side-scrolling game with somewhat uninspiring level design and enemy designs, but overall it was enjoyable and you know, very much worth the the $1 price of admission. So if you guys enjoyed side-scrolling platformers, make sure you give it a shot. You know, when it's on sale, I think it's worth at that price point. Next up, we have Blasphemous. Speaking of challenging games and speaking of the Steam Deck, you know, this is another one that I decided to give it a whirl on the Steam Deck. A highly recommended Metroidvania game with a very interesting setting, kind of like religious inspiration, you know, the Catholic Church, and you know, just a very well designed Metroidvania with very, very interesting boss battles and overall setting and lore, similar to the Souls games. You know, very like mysterious characters and very mysterious storyline that, you know, it makes you wonder, makes you, you know, keep wanting playing the game to I guess understand a little bit more about the lore and the characters and the setting of the game. So brutally challenging as well. It's a very difficult game, but once you get the hang of it, you know, the timing, the game becomes very fun. And yeah, it's one of the most highly acclaimed Metroidvania games out there, so make sure you try it out if you enjoy games on that genre. And next up, a PlayStation 5 game, Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, has all the DLC content, and as you guys know, I already beat the main game 2 years ago, and here we have Iki Island, which is an expansion. And again, it's almost like a game on its own. You know, it takes like 15 to 30 hours depending on really how much time you want to put and how many side missions you want to cover. But I did spend my time with this expansion. I got all the trophies in this case. Love this game. Obviously not as good as the main game, but it does have some new features, you know, such as, you know, new armor types, new unlockables, new skills or moves, you know, for your character and whatnot. And of course, you know, the graphics are beautiful. Sucker Punch did a fantastic job of developing this game and making it look great. So very happy with Ghost of Tsushima Iki Island expansion. Highly recommend it if you guys have beaten the main game. There's plenty of reasons to go back to the game, and Iki Island is the main one. Next up, a 2022 release that really I guess got a lot of positive reviews, and unsurprisingly, you know, I also loved this game. This game is Stray, which was I guess published by Annapurna Interactive, and just yeah, overall great game. I wasn't expecting too much, but this game surprised me in a very positive way. The story, the setting, I really enjoyed the story and the setting in this game. Very well made, fantastic, the city design, if you will, with the post-apocalyptic, setting, if you will, and a very interesting story that as you progress through the game, you really want to keep playing to see what happens next. And yeah, fantastic game that I really enjoyed, and highly recommend it if you guys enjoy kind of like adventure exploration games. This was a very fun one to play. Now we're going a little bit retro. Decided to play Super Mario Land again. This is a game that I beat a couple years ago. I never managed to beat the original back in the day because I never owned a Game Boy or the OG Game Boy system. But yeah, Super Mario Land. It's definitely an interesting title. It's a very primitive Mario game. You can tell that Nintendo were still kind of like exploring the limitations of the Game Boy hardware, and you can tell Super Mario Land is not the best example of the quality that Nintendo can produce, but overall it's a decent game. It has some very interesting concepts, some shmup sections that I thought were fairly interesting, and it's a classic Mario game that it's worth exploring, and just very interesting to see how Nintendo evolved. If you compare Super Mario Land, the first one, to the second one on the Game Boy, you can see a jump in quality that is pretty massive. So worth exploring to see a kind of like the early work that Nintendo did for its own handheld system. Continuing with the trend, Donkey Kong Land. Was very happy to finally play this game. I didn't really and never owned this game back in the day, but yeah, decided to give it a whirl and loved this game. Obviously, it's not as good as the Super Nintendo counterparts, but I did have a great time. Some levels, or most of the levels, were actually unique. But what I really enjoyed about this game is that it had its own original worlds, especially the last one in the city. I really enjoyed that setting. Compared to the Super Nintendo one. So yeah, the game has its limitations, obviously, by being on the Game Boy hardware, but nevertheless, I think Rareware did a fantastic job of creating a unique title that it's similar to the Super Nintendo version, but with the obvious hardware limitations. Next up, we have the Gunk, which is another Xbox game through Game Pass, and this is kind of like the perfect Game Pass game. I do want to make an impressions video. I'm running a little bit behind on making those, but the Gunk was a very fun one. It was released by Image and Form. They have of fame from the SteamWorld series and games, and yeah, this is an adventure game, third-person view that it's really fun. That it puts emphasis on exploration and eliminating this threat that it's affecting this lush and green world, and it's up to you to restore the the nature of the planet, and then at the same time finding out some story related things that are very interesting. But yeah, I'll do an impressions video on this game. I don't want to talk too much about it because I really enjoyed my time with the Gunk. It's not the greatest game out there, but it's the perfect Game Pass type of game because you can beat this in less than 10 hours, between 5 to 10 hours. So I really enjoyed my time with this game, and I highly recommend it if you guys can try it out. And speaking of Game Pass, another one that really, I really enjoy this. Came out on release day, and it's the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. Another beat 'em up inspired on the early TMNT games of the past, the arcade and the Super Nintendo games. This one is fantastic. Some quality of life improvements, such as the addition of a dodge button, which is a godsend in my opinion. Retro-looking graphics, but at the same time, a lot of quality, a lot of a lot of detail in the sprite work. So this is definitely one of the most fun games that I played on 2022, and I'm just glad that the game made its way to Game Pass to try it out. It also has an online component to it, which is pretty cool, and unlockable characters, which is always a plus for these games. You can go back and get the unlockables and more characters and whatnot. So definitely one of the best games, or one of the most fun games of the year. With the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. Next up, if you guys are a fan of the Resident Evil 4 inventory system, save room here, it was a fun indie title, a pretty cheap game on Steam that really relies on the, I guess, organization aspects of the Resident Evil 4. Basically you had your briefcase or your suitcase, and the fun was kind of like maximizing the amount of room, with the ammo and weapons that you were carrying. And this game takes on that concept. Obviously, it may sound boring and repetitive, but it's actually pretty fun. And for the price, it's a very, very cheap game. I don't think you can go wrong if you're a Resident Evil fan. I think you're going to find a lot of enjoyment out of it. The game does have some clever puzzle levels, later in the game, where you have to combine ammo with weapons, or gunpowder mixes, to create ammo, and then kind of like combine that with your weapons, healing your own character and things like that. So save room, if you guys are a fan of the Resident Evil games, I think you're gonna find some enjoyment out of this. Make sure you try it out. Next up, Beacon Pines. I do have an impressions video on this. I really enjoyed. This is a narrative driven game that it's both cute and creepy at the same time. Very interesting art direction and characters. I really enjoyed the story in this game. It's not gonna be up there in terms of one of the best story driven games out there, but I really enjoyed the kind of like the storybook concept that the game provided. Different endings that you can get, but at the same time very easy to replay certain levels. Pick different actions or charms, if you will, and then that allows you to have different branching paths in the story, and therefore you get different endings as you progress through the game. So very clever in how the game was designed and presented, and very easy to play. It was on Game Pass again. Played this on the Xbox Series S, so definitely had a pretty good time with Beacon Pines. Next up is Monument Valley 2, and speaking of variety, I played this on my Android smartphone. I do have an impressions video of the first Monument Valley game, which I also played on my cell phone a couple years ago. So I absolutely love these games. They're puzzle games that are very clever in an isometric view. You have to rotate the different parts of the scenery, different perspective puzzle driven puzzle pieces in the game. Absolutely love the art direction. Very colorful, very meaningful, and just a minimalistic presentation that really blends together with the game. So highly recommend it if you guys have a smartphone. It's a fairly cheap game, so make sure you try it out. Monument Valley, both 1 and 2. For Android. Next up, a pleasant surprise. You guys know me. I love my 3D platforming games, and Tinykin, another Game Pass game I played on my Xbox Series S, based on the positive reviews from both people here that I know on the community, but also from publications out there that really scored this game high. And definitely this was one of the most pleasant surprises of 2022. Just a very well designed 3D platformer that doesn't really have focus on combat. In fact, you can't really kill enemies in this game. This is more focused towards collecting items. It's more of a collectathon that forces, or has these Tiny King characters similar to the Pikmin characters that have unique features and skills that you can use in order to reach new areas, new levels and whatnot. So very cleverly designed, and just an overall fun game. Definitely one of the best games of 2022, and very glad I gave it a shot. And speaking of side-scrolling platformers, this is another indie one that Alex from Turbozone is going to be very proud of me, because he's the one that, as a joke, kind of picked this game to talk about it on the Button Mappers podcast, and I decided to give it a shot. I mean, why not? These games are less than $1, so and they're actually fairly enjoyable side-scrolling indie platformers that have a retro look. So we're talking about Dadish 1, 2, and 3. I beat the trilogy of Dadish games. They're fairly short. I think each game took me around 4 hours, but that's getting all the achievements in them. They're very simplistic side-scrolling games with a certain unique kind of like sense of humor. But they have they're pretty decent level design, character design, and they're enjoyable games. So suited for me, I guess. I'm a new dad, so Dadish is all three games are fun, except that the third one was not as good as the first two. But I'll probably do an impressions video on the trilogy just to talk a little bit about my experience with these games. But highly recommend it. Again, you can get them on sale for less than $1. So at that price point, it's very easy to recommend them if you enjoyed side-scrolling platforming games. Another side-scrolling platforming games. We're on a roll here, but this is a fun one. It's a very short one, and I wish it was a little bit more fleshed out. This game is Beanie. It's heavily inspired by the Donkey Kong Country games on the Super Nintendo, as you guys can see here on the gameplay. The graphics have that pre-rendered background look for the Super Nintendo. Very unique look, very nice looking game that I really enjoyed. You guys know me, I love my Donkey Kong Country games on the Super Nintendo, and this game has definitely inspiration from those games. It's unfortunately it's very short, but again, it's a very short game, so the price point is adequate in my opinion. And another quirky thing is that this is a vertical platformer, not horizontal like most of them are. So interesting game, worth checking out if you guys are a fan of the Donkey Kong Country art direction. Next up, we have a clone game, and Vampire Survivors really set the gaming world on fire when it was released in late 2021, I believe. And Rogue Genesia is definitely another clone. It's a reverse shmup, as they call it, or arcade indie type of game. Very action packed. But I really like the way this game is set up. I may do an impressions video on this, but it's basically broken down by levels. The game also takes some inspiration from Slay the Spire in the sense that after you complete a level, you can have branching paths, and you can choose your own path, and then you make all the way you make all the way to the top to like a major boss battle. So very well developed and designed game. Highly recommended if you guys are looking for an alternative to Vampire Survivors. I think the way this game is designed and laid out, it's very unique and very fun. Next up, we have Overwatch 2. I was a huge fan of Overwatch. The first Overwatch game, put almost 100 hours in that game alone. And Overwatch 2, I put a lot of time. I completed all the different multiplayer games, or modes, if you will. Played the Halloween PvE mode, which was pretty fun. I know a lot of people have a lot of complaints about Overwatch 2. I'm going to do a separate video on this, but personally, I loved my time with Overwatch 2. It's free to play. Can't complain too much, and I did download this like a month after it was released, so a lot of the early complaints were already resolved by then. But yeah, Overwatch 2 feels a lot like the first Overwatch game, which a lot of people hated that aspect, but I actually enjoyed that because I'm a huge fan of the first game. So in my opinion, very solid online competitive game, and again, it's free to play this time around. So I personally had a lot of fun playing Overwatch 2. I downloaded this on the Xbox Series S, so very fun. A very fun title that I plan going back to it. Let's see. Next up, we have an indie shmup that can also be purchased for under $1. This is definitely the definition of a weird, just quirky game. Planets, bullets, and vodka. Very primitive presentation and art direction, but it's surprisingly fun. This game is like retro infinite shmup, with randomly generated enemies and levels and whatnot. So kind of unique in that regard in terms of the gameplay, but again, very very archaic, you know, very simple to play, but yeah, I enjoyed the random aspect of the game, and of course, you know, you can get this for like super dirt cheap, and it's kind of like a joke meme game, you know, in the Steam world. So that's where I played this game, and yeah, highly recommend it if you guys are in for a laugh. You know, make sure you try this game out. Another cheapo game on Steam that I played, but this one is actually addicting. Very simple to pick up and play, but hard to master. And that game is Timberman. Reminds me a lot of one of the mini games you unlock for I believe Kirby Secret Allies or Star Allies, you know, on the Nintendo Switch. You basically have to chop wood, you know, cut some lumber, and it's very easy. You know, you use the shoulder buttons to do so, but you know, the key is to avoid obstacles, and yeah, very easy to pick up and play. Tons of unlockables. Very fun game. Highly recommend it if you guys are looking for like a short session type of game. This is the way to go with Timberman. And last but not least, we have Witch Eye. This is one of the most beautiful looking games. The sprite work they did in this game was fantastic. I really enjoyed the art direction. The presentation in this game was wonderful. The gameplay is a little bit on the weird side, which is what drew me towards this game. It's actually a game where you kind of like flick this eyeball, you know, and it's a little bit hard to control on using a regular controller. It's more suited towards kind of like touch screen controls, but overall it worked out pretty well. It's a decent game. I absolutely love the presentation and the soundtrack in this game. I will definitely make an impressions video later on to talk a little bit more about this game, because it's very unique, and I really enjoyed my time with Witch Eye. And that's it, guys. You know, 35 games, not too bad, not too not too terrible, not great, but not terrible. You know, I think I did pretty well, especially earlier in the year with some longer games. You know, some RPGs like East 9 and the Game Deck, and then towards the end of the year, I think I was on a side-scrolling, you know, mad. Rampage, you know, playing a lot of side-scrolling games, but I love that genre, so I think it was an overall productive year, considering all these circumstances. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all later. Take it easy.